Hello, Jason. It's Friday, January 17th, and today I want to talk to you about murder mysteries. But first, I think it's time for another Steve special presentation, so sit back and enjoy. Of all the websites on all the internet, he had to click on mine. What's the probability of that? I guess it's time to go in search of X. Now, there are a number of variables in any murder mystery, and the first one that we need to identify is the victim. There are two separate trends that you can follow when identifying a victim. First, you can have a story that's closed off, and in that case, there's going to be a number of victims because suspects are going to be killed off one by one. This is your typical Agatha Christie murder in an old mansion on a hill kind of story. But in the second type of murder mystery, it's a more open world, so there's only one victim, and new suspects appear as new evidence points in new directions. And this is more like your typical CSI cop drama type of narrative. For the purposes of adapting the murder mystery narrative format to teach math, I feel like using a closed world would be better. It would allow the students to eliminate the characters using math, and then us to narratively kill them off. Beyond that, it provides more opportunity for the second variable we need to include in our story, crime scenes. Crime scenes are where readers are going to get the vast majority of their hard data. It's very hard to mislead people with something that's right in front of their eyes. Of course, there is a second set of data that can be gathered by interviewing characters, but you never know whether they're telling the truth or not. If they're the murderer, chances are they're lying. And so building a mystery in a closed world allows us to kill off characters and build new crime scenes with new information, new ways of looking at the same problems. In fact, if you kill off multiple characters, then each one can be killed according to a different unit in the curriculum. That way, in order to eliminate the next character from being a suspect, you have to use a new method. That brings me to the next three important variables that we have to consider: means, motive, and opportunity. Now, ideally, your suspect pool will all have motive for killing the first victim. And so it comes down to the detective to determine which suspects had the means and the opportunity. By eliminating either the opportunity or the means, a suspect can be ruled out and can be made a victim. And both of these things can be expressed narratively in order to give data that the reader can use to determine whether or not they actually were capable of committing the first murder. For example, consider this as the first crime scene. Narratively, let's say it takes place in a ballroom and this image was captured from the security cameras minutes before all power was cut. So, we have certain data. We know where the victim and all of the suspects were prior to the lights going out. Consider we give a specific interval of time between the lights going out and the lights coming back on. When the lights come back on, the victim is dead. Then, by calculating the diagonal distance between each suspect and the victim, we can determine whether it's mathematically possible for them to have made the distance there and back to kill them. We can then make the problem even more complicated by giving each suspect a new position after the lights turn back on. In fact, with the inclusion of doors, we could have the readers determine whether or not it was possible for any of the suspects to have left the room. This gives them several sets of data to work through to determine whether or not each of the specific suspects could have killed the victim. Thus, by solving this problem, we can determine whether or not all of the suspects had the opportunity to commit the murder. Now, from the reader's point of view, this may or may not be helpful. After all, it could be that every single person in that room had the opportunity. And so you would have to go through all the different elements of the crime scene to find the one thing that stands out exonerating someone. Then, through some narrative device, that exonerated character would be murdered and a new crime scene would present itself with new problems. This process would then repeat itself, allowing you to work your way through all the units in the curriculum and eliminating suspect by suspect until you have maybe 3 or 4 left. Then, you could have the students split into groups and present their cases for who they think the actual murderer was. And most importantly, they would have to prove it mathematically. Anyway, I think this is definitely an idea that we have to develop further. It absolutely plays off both of our strengths, and it's something that we can use in the world afterwards. But moving on, the only other thing I have to talk about today is chess. Now, a couple of moves ago, I did warn you not to confuse retreat for allure. And it seems as though you've neglected to take my warning. Queen from e7 to h4.